Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the world. Even more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in Georgia, in Kansas, in Missouri, in Texas, Chicago, Illinois, in Arkansas, in California, in New York, in Pennsylvania, in Canada, in Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, Africa, Kenya, Pakistan, Zambia, to the United Kingdom, to our brethren in Australia, also in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Papua New Guinea. And to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad, greetings. May the good Lord bless you, my dear brothers and sisters. This is our special episode number 50. Just an hour exposition of the prophecy as the last final warning message just prior to the close of provision. And still, we focus our attention to the subject, the 11th hour. We already read the 11th hour is the end of the world, according to 3 Symbolic Code 5 and 6, page 12. And in answerer number 2, page 37, the end of the world is the harvest. And in answerer number 2, page 36, harvest is a period of time, having a beginning and ending. And during its time, men are saved. And since we focus our attention to the 11th hour, which is directly pointing to the 144,000 living saints, by which, according to track number 5, page 74, the 144,000 are sealed at the beginning of the harvest. Answerer number 2, page 37. It says, track number 5, page 74. It will be noted that the 144,000 are called the first fruits, denoting that they are sealed at the beginning of the harvest. Or in other words, the 144,000 are sealed at the first section of the harvest, because harvest is a period of time having beginning and ending, according to answerer number 2, page 36. But it is during the first section of the harvest by which the 144,000 are sealed. We read several times that of all the periods, harvest is the shortest. Track number 3, page 65. And we know that there are 3 periods: sowing, growing, and harvest. And among these 3 periods, harvest is the shortest. And according to track number 3, page 58, it says the 3.5 years from the beginning of Christ's ministry to His crucifixion being the sowing time. So the sowing time consists of 3.5 years. But the harvest is the shortest. So the harvest must be less than 3.5 years. And the entire period of the harvest is divided only into 2 sections, beginning and ending. But all in all, the entire period of the harvest, both the beginning and the ending, must be less than 3.5 years, being the shortest. But let us focus our attention to the beginning of the harvest, by which the 144,000 living saints are sealed. Now let us read again, track number 5 on page 88. It says, and finally, the only revelation pertaining to and coming at a year, and preparing the 4 angels for to slay the 3rd part of men is, says the Lord, the year of my redeem. Isaiah 63 verse 4. And this year at which His people are redeemed is, of course, the time of the sealing and of the deliverance of the 144,000. So there must be a specific, particular year by which the 144,000 are sealed. And that year is called the first of the harvest, which is called the beginning of the harvest. And we need to ascertain clearly that specific year. I know only the foolish virgins will not listen to this message. Although, after the harvest is past and the summer is ended, that is the divinely appointed time by which the foolish virgins will become alarmed and they will begin to acknowledge the message. So, this message is lovingly addressed to all the wise virgins, those who are willing to pay the price. Now, I would like to read 1SR Pocket Edition on page 56. 1SR Pocket Edition on page 56. Accordingly, the antitypical Passover will take place in the time of the first fruit harvest, the sealing of the 144,000, the first fruits. So when does the sealing of the 144,000 will take place? On that predicted antitypical Passover, according to the shepherd's rod. So let us now study closely, brothers and sisters, that very important subject, the antitypical Passover. Here in track number 12, on page 34 and page 35, it says, "And the cry of your mourners shall be in 1 hour, so great riches is come to naught." Revelation 17 verse 12, Revelation 18 verse 10, and verse 17. This hour which brings the death throes can be none other than that which, according to Jesus' parable, Matthew 20 verse 11 to 16, is the last parabolic hour, period of the day, provisionary time. That is, from the 11th hour call for laborers, the last message to the world, Malachi 4 verse 5, to the 12th hour sunset, ancient time peace, the end of the day, the close of the gospel period, Matthew 24 verse 14, the close of the harvest, Jeremiah 8:20, the close of provision, Revelation 22 verse 11. Now, brothers and sisters, 11th hour is the end of the world, according to 3 Symbolic Code 5 and 6, page 12. The end of the world is the harvest. Answerer number 2, page 37. But harvest is into division. First in the church and second in the world, or Babylon. Now, I would like to read track number 3, pages 70 and page 71. The second section of the separation thus being completed, provisionary time is closed, whereupon from the wicked will be heard the horrible wail of doom. The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. Jeremiah 8:20. This being the dreadful experience of the tares in Babylon. In the second section of the harvest, there must, as a type, be a similar and precedent experience for the tares in the Laodicean church in the first section of the harvest. So the first section of the harvest is in the Laodicean church. So the 11th hour, the entire period of the 11th hour is divided into two divisions. The harvest in the church and the harvest in the world. But the entire period of the 11th hour will end at the commencement of the Millennium, as stated in 2SR 229, saying the 11th hour call is the last on record, and only an hour before sunset Millennium. So it is only an hour before sunset. Sunset represent the commencement of the Millennium, according to the shepherd's rod. The shepherd's rod admonishes us that in order for us to establish the time concerning the 11th hour, we need to establish when does it will expire. White House Recruiter, page 13. It says, "How can we know for a certainty in which hour we find ourselves? And if our own call to service has come, we can know only by establishing the time in which the last parabolic hour expires." We already established when does the last parabolic hour expires. It expires on the Millennium, the commencement of the Millennium, by which that commencement of the Millennium is the antitypical Jubilee. Now, I would like to read 2SR 252. A computation of like manner was employed to define the year of Jubilee. Say the Lord, and thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years, and the space of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. Leviticus 25 verse 8. The 50th year, while the land rested, being also a type of the Millennium, showing that the land shall keep a Sabbath rest, a like computation is used. Therefore, at the beginning of the 1,000 years is the commencement of the Jubilee in its antitype. Jubilee consists only one specific year, the 50th year. So the entire year is called the year of Jubilee. And that entire year is called the beginning of the 1,000 years. Of course, it must be referring to the Bible calendar. And that is the reason why the restoration of the Bible creation calendar is in absolute importance in the unfoldment of the entire plan of redemption. There is no possibility that we could be able to ascertain clearly the commencement of the 11th hour period unless we could establish the specific time by which the 11th hour will expire. The shepherd's rod already give us the information that the 11th hour expire in the year of Jubilee, which is represented by sunset or the commencement of the millennium. Now, that Jubilee is typifying the typical ark because according to the shepherd's rod, the New Jerusalem, when God's people will be in the New Jerusalem during 1,000 years, represents the antitypical ark as stated in 2SR 245 and 246. I will no longer read. Just post the statement as God declared the danger to the old world. That paragraph. And we are familiar that Noah entered into the ark into the 120th year, typifying the New Jerusalem, that God's people will be in the New Jerusalem on the 120th Jubilee, because the commencement of the millennium is the end part of the 6,000 years, and Jubilee being 50 years, 6,000 divided by 50 equals 120. So the end of the 6,000 years prophecy is the 120th Jubilee, as stated in tract number 3, third edition, on page 95, saying clearly, therefore, the universal number by which we must multiply the number of probationary times 600 is 10, and 600 times 10 gives 6,000 years. So let us project that to paragraphs. But in this study, the cross is the dividing line. The year of Christ's crucifixion, the year of Christ's crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension is the year of Jubilee. But that was the 80th Jubilee, representing the age of Moses, when Moses delivered God's people from the Egyptian bondage. Remember, according to 1SR 248, it says the Bible is Moses. And the name Moses contained 5 letters, the numerical value of the Bible. 6 BC, 1055. The time had now come. The Spirit had been waiting for the crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. For 10 days, the disciples offered their petitions for the outpouring of the Spirit, and Christ in heaven added his intercession. This was the occasion of his ascension and inauguration, a Jubilee in heaven. 6 BC, 1055. So the 40 days from Christ's resurrection to his ascension, according to tract number 3, serve as a type. I would like to read tract number 3, 1934 edition, page 66 and 67. It says, let us read. Moreover, tract number 3, 1934 edition, page 66. Moreover, his personal care in gathering his people in those 40 days, which we see to be a type of his supervision of the ingathering of the fruits in every generation, should therefore reveal that he is the lamb slain from the foundation of the world and the good shepherd in all ages. And we connect that 40 days to the last and the final ingathering of all God's people, both the living saints and the resurrected saints, and that would be on the second visible coming of Jesus Christ, which is the commencement of the millennium, according to 2SR 161. Here in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1, now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him. And since that gathering is typifying the 40 days, indicates that the year of Jubilee is also called the 40th Jubilee from the year of Christ's ascension. typifying the 40 days. Then, it is easy to locate now the commencement of the 11th hour call. By simply adding, brothers and sisters, let us multiply first 40 Jubilees. 40 times 50 equals 2,000. Now, let us now add 31 ED plus 2,000 equals 2,031. And we know that the Bible calendar will end on March 30, 2031. Now, let us first establish how many years the entire period of the 11th hour. First of all, in 2SR 229, it says, 2SR 229, the 11th hour call. The 11th hour call is the last on record, and only an hour before sunset, Millennium. The time for its deliverance to the world is shorter than any universal message ever given. Though the time is the shortest, its area over the earth's surface is more extensive than any. Now, the shepherd's rod is very plain enough to be misunderstood, that through the seven universal message and 7 universal movements, the 11th hour period is the shortest. And we already explained to you that among the first 6 universal movements and universal message, the 6-hour call, which is 12 noon in our modern time piece of clock, is the Millerites movement. And its proclamation consists only 10 years. So let us read again the statement here. White House Recruiter, page 19. It says, the only revelation of new prophetic truth subsequent to the Reformation is the announcement of the year in which was to begin the work of cleansing the sanctuary. It says, primarily in behalf of the dead, based on Daniel 8:14, but not then fully understood. As its announcement was made by the First-day Adventists, it necessarily follows that they were the third group of servants with a new and distinctive message. And as is well known, they started proclaiming it in the year 1833, announcing that the cleansing of the sanctuary was to commence in the year 1844. Thus, in 1833, the clock of parabolic time struck the hour of 6. When does the universal message of the 6-hour call, or 12 noon on our modern time piece of clock, they began to proclaim the message according to the shepherd's rod, 1833. When does the Millerites movement, that movement came to its end? 2SR page 97. But as the disappointment came in 1844 through the misunderstanding of what was to transpire at the end of the prophetic period, the movement created by Miller came to its end. When does the movement created by Miller ended? October 22, 1844. Therefore, the entire period of the 6-hour consists only 10 years. Now, if the 11th hour period is the shortest, it must be less than 10 years. But we need to be specific. We need to establish the absolute fact, the entire period of the 11th hour. Now, let us read 2SR 237. 2SR 237. It says, 2SR 237. If God worked on the 3-hour schedule with the crucifixion of Jesus, see chart on page 22, and the same rule was followed in the period called day, then he certainly would not follow another rule in the period called night. The reason he has followed that particular rule is to present to his church the exact time of her history by periods. To repeat again, brothers and sisters, the church mentioned here is the 11th hour church. And the reason that Jesus Christ followed that particular rule, what particular rule? 3-hour schedule. And the reason that God followed that particular rule is to present to his church, or in other words, to let the 11th hour church be able to understand the exact time of her history by periods. Now, let us go back again to Revelation 6 verse 6. Let's read Revelation 6 verse 6. But let us read 2SR 225 and 226. It says, with the previous explanation of Revelation 6 verse 6, a measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny, we shall endeavor to prove that the symbols point back to the parable of the householder, and Jesus allegorically look forward to John's vision. If the explanation perfectly fits the parable and the vision in harmony with God's book and law, and a present truth lesson is derived therefrom, then only must we accept it as truth. So, the vision of John in Revelation chapter 6, verse 6, it is the one that explained the parable in Matthew 20. And whatever the object of that parable, it is intended only to the 144,000 living saints, as stated in 2SR 234. Now, I would like to read 2SR 234. It says, why only 2 kinds of cereals brought to view? Why not 5? The 2 cereals are sufficient to illustrate the thought and to clear the lesson. But the chief reason for only 2 is to draw attention to the first and last calls, because reference is made of but 2 Israels, namely Israel after the flesh, the descendants of Abraham, and Israel after the Spirit, the 144,000. But the object of the lesson is for the latter, who are hard at the 11th hour, for the truth of the parable has never been understood by any other company. That is a declarative statement. Whatever the truth of the parable in Matthew 20, never been understood by any other company. Only the company of the 11th hour, the saints that will no longer to taste death. And that is the heavenly truth mentioned in 2SR 172, by which that heavenly truth only the 144,000 understood, because that heavenly truth was not bestowed by God to any of them who experienced death. Now, brothers and sisters, the reason that God uses only 2 kinds of cereals, it's so because God wants to draw our attention to the first 3 hours and to the last 1 parabolical hour. What is the first 3 hours? Now, I would like to read 2SR 237. The first 3 hours on the dial indicate from creation to the fall of Adam. What is the first 3 hours? From creation to the fall of Adam. Now, let us now ascertain clearly what is specific here. Thus, Adam and Eve were fallen into sin. So, let us read 5 BC 1081. 5 BC 1081. Christ, in the wilderness of temptation, stood in Adam's place to bear the test he failed to endure. Here Christ overcame in the sinner's behalf 4,000 years after Adam turned his back upon the light of his home. So that is the year by which Adam and Eve were driven in the Garden of Eden. By which from that time, according to the spirit prophecy, 4,000 years from the time Adam were driven from the Garden of Eden to the time when Jesus Christ overcame temptation in the wilderness. And since we are familiar, the year by which Jesus Christ overcame temptation in the wilderness, that was in 27 AD. So it's easy to locate the year by which Adam and Eve were fallen into sin. By subtract 4,000 minus 27. That would be 3973 BC. Now, brothers and sisters, it's easy now to locate the 11th hour call through the evidences. The first 3 hours, that is from creation to the fall of Adam. How many years? The first 3 hours. 27 years. Now, let us now divide 27 divided by 3 equals 9. Therefore, in that revelation, we can firmly establish that the entire period of the 11th hour will consist exactly 9 years. Now, since we already established when does the 11th hour expires, that is on the year of Jubilee, which would be on the year 2031. Of course, the last day of the year of Jubilee must be March 30, 2031. So let us now count backward from March 30, 2031, 9 years. That would be the commencement of the 11th hour period, which is the shortest of all the periods, because among the 6 universal messages, among the 6 universal movements, the movement of William Miller, the one that had been called at the 6th hour, is the shortest. Consists only 10 years. But the 11th hour must be shorter than the Millerites movement, for it consists only exactly 9 years. So let us now use our Bible. So let us go to March 30, 2031, timeanddeath.com, Bible calendar. And then let us count backward 9 years to establish the exact period of time as the commencement of the 11th hour period. Although we will prove this subject in all angles of the prophecy. And that is the first angle as first rod. That in order for us to establish the commencement of the period of the 11th hour, we need to establish first, when does the 11th hour expire? The period of the 11th hour expire, it must be at the end of the year of Jubilee, because Jubilee consists of 1 year. So from March 30, 2031, Bible calendar. Now let us count backward, subtract. Let us convert it to days. 9 times 360. 3,240 days. 3,240 days. So by counting backward from March 30, 2031, 9 years, you will fall September 13, 2021. Therefore, brothers and sisters, September 13, 2021, this year, this coming September 13, 2021, would be the bracket period of the 11th hour period that will culminate on the year of Jubilee, September 13, 2021. And let us check that September 13, 2021 in different angles of the prophecy. I would like to read again on 1SR Packet Edition, page 10 and 11. It says, "But how can we know for sure," and other questions, "that these and companion publications are the genuine fruit of the unrolling of the scroll and of the sealing angel's arrival? Simply if the claimant herein on trial is vindicated by all relevant scriptures and other inspired testimony. And if it is, then the only admissible conclusion is that the divinely appointed and long-awaited hour has struck, and that this literature is the instrument used by inspiration to make the event known to God's people." What literature? The Shepherd's Rod publications. So if we could be able to establish in all angles of the prophecy as explained by the Shepherd's Rod that this September 13, 2021 would be the commencement of the 11th hour period, then we need to humbly admit and accept the truth that cometh from heaven. And I'm giving thanks to all our brethren who are in deep concern about my situation. And I love that much of your honest concern. But I'm asking apology that there is a push. It seems that the Spirit is pushing me forward to hurry up. I need to proclaim the message because the time is running out. Although there is really a time that I'm not feeling well, but I even got more sick. If I could not proclaim the message, I will feel very stressed. So those brethren who are requesting me to keep me a rest for a while, apology, I cannot do such thing. Although my presentation is reduced only to 1 hour, it is even more easier. And God knows, I give all things to all our Almighty God. So thank you very much for your deep concern and hoping that God would bless you, brethren. So we will continue this subject tomorrow. So at this time, we just establish the specific date by which the 11th hour period will then commence. And that would be on September 13, 2021. Thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.